Article 15 a sign of a good NCO? Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and recently one of you raised the old question of whether or not an Article 15 is an indication that a senior NCO is, a better NCO. Personally, I tend to say yes, it is a good sign, not because of the Article 15 itself, but because of what has to come afterwards. As an example, once upon a time, I had a platoon sergeant who was this skinny string bean of a woman. She was a wonderful and compassionate leader who could really get a lot of work done. But when she was a specialist, she had punched her sergeant and gotten an Article 15. She had been, by her own admission, an angry young woman with a short fuse and a chip on her shoulder. But, like I said, she was also one of the best platoon sergeants I ever worked with. But this is why I think the combination of some youthful misadventures just short of criminality, combined with making it into the ranks of the senior NCOs, it is a good combination. In order to do both, a person has to grow. They have to recognize that they're not good enough yet and that they need to change. They have to get control over themselves, and learning to do that makes them better able to exercise control over others. And not that an NCO without an Article 15 is ineffective as a leader, and for the love of God, I am not advocating that you go out and get an Article 15. But I am saying that an NCO who towed the line from day one, well, they just haven't had to overcome the same personal challenges as someone who, didn't toe the line. It's a bit like this. Have you ever ridden in the passenger seat of a truck while somebody was driving in really, really icy conditions? I mean, where you're sitting right up front with them and you can see how they're behaving. And have you noticed that you can tell whether or not the driver has experienced these kinds of bad conditions before? I mean, the person who has never driven in icy conditions is either far too timid or too reckless and blasé. But that person who has experienced truly icy roads, well, they're a combination of cautious and confident. They understand the risks that are involved in what they're doing, and they act accordingly. Something similar seems to happen with these NCOs who've had Article 15s. They understand how the military catches and how it punishes. They understand where the guardrails are. They know what's reasonable and what's pushing things a little too far. They also understand that not all boneheaded fuck-ups by E3s mean that the person is a piece of garbage who has to be kicked out of the military as fast as possible. And they can counsel that E3 to get back in good standing. But so what? Well, in a lot of ways, I think this is most important at the intersection between senior NCOs and junior officers. Not for nothing, but young officers coming out of ROTC or West Point are, just because of the environment they've been in, kind of straight-laced goody two-shoes. The kinds of infractions that might, disrupt a junior enlisted's career, well, they're also the kinds of infractions that might completely squelch a cadet's chance of getting commissioned. That means that for the NCOs who are welcoming the junior second lieutenants into the military, that you might have to spotlight some of the risks associated with this world. You might have to provide some context about what's going on, and you might have to deal with some not-so-silent judgment about your past indiscretions. But you're grown-ups, and you can deal with all of that. However, the implications of this for those junior second lieutenants, well, they might be even more daunting. And I'm going to skip all of the obvious comments about having empathy for people in tough situations and listening to your leaderships, and instead, consider this. Something similar to this phenomenon about Article 15s happens to junior officers. There are a myriad of ways that a young officer can get their tail caught in the machine. Maybe not punching their boss, but a junior officer can screw up property accountability, chain of custody, they can violate command policy and find themselves in hot water. And while all of this is undesirable and unpleasant when it happens, it is also one of those opportunities for growth. The junior officer will eventually go on to greater responsibility, and the harsh lessons learned looking for the missing what's-it, well, they serve to make that future officer better. Nobody's perfect, but then again, perfection isn't really the goal. We're just looking for you to grow. And if you want to see why this perspective is so important for junior officers, watch this video.